Hello, dear friends. Today we'll continue exploring Otto Carius's memoirs. In this part, he describes his tank battalion's failed attack near Pskov in the spring of 1944. Don't forget to leave your thoughts on this material and give this video a like. Well, let's get started. The Knight's Cross in the hospital. Our time in Narva was coming to an end. In late April, the company received orders to follow our battalion to the Pskov area. Pskov is located at the intersection of roads along the Leningrad-Dunaburg highway. The town is situated directly south of Lake Pskov, Lake Pskov, which stretches northward toward Lake Peipus. From Silame, we headed west toward our supply base. Even without direct enemy intervention, a tank is quite a headache. A miserable period of rain and mud had set in, and even the road was barely passable. Wheeled vehicles were sinking up to their axles in the mud, and we feared our tanks would get stuck up to their hulls. Each Tiger was towing 1 or 2 trucks. The trucks could not move forward under their own power. Mud was clogging the radiators at the front. If the tow rope was strong enough, it would pull out the truck's front axle along with the wheels. When we finally arrived at the train station, most of the vehicles were in need of repair. Most of them had to be towed onto freight cars. We looked forward to the train ride. We could stretch out on the straw in the crew cars and finally sleep peacefully for the first time in a long while. We didn't anticipate any emergency wake-ups during the trip, so we took advantage of this welcome opportunity since no one knew what awaited us in the Pskov area. I, of course, took our company dog, Hasso, with me. But when I woke up at the stop, the dog was gone. According to the soldiers' reports, he had jumped out of the moving train, perhaps to retrieve something someone had thrown away. So I lost a good friend whom I missed dearly, even though he was a 4-legged friend. The battalion had reserved a village for us where we were supposed to be quartered. Apparently, we were supposed to enjoy a few weeks of rest. I didn't realize this until our new commander, Major Schwanner, visited me shortly after our arrival. We didn't know him yet at that time. He asked me to draw up a training schedule for the next 4 weeks. I didn't particularly like that assignment. I believed the men needed to recover their strength after long, difficult operations. Naturally, even while resting in the rear, we had to carry out our assigned duties during the day. But I lacked the patience to listen to instructions on artillery fire and similar nonsense, especially since there were no green recruits among us. Surprisingly, the rest did me no good. I realized that even with the best of intentions, there are limits to human physical capabilities. I began having asthma attacks, which soon became so severe that I had to stop every few steps. The battalion doctor, Dr. Schenbeck, took care of me. I was ordered to stay in bed and was not allowed to smoke or drink alcohol. The fact that I had no desire for either of these things showed just how bad I was. But after a week, I had recovered enough to resume reconnaissance missions along the approaches to the front. We were to inspect roads and bridges in our new sector behind the front line. We were also to establish contact with the troops at their positions in order to familiarize ourselves with the surroundings in case we had to operate there. For operations in the Narva sector on May 4th, I was awarded the Knight's Cross. The company said I had fallen ill solely out of a desire to avoid the formation of a battalion, which was planned to be entrusted to me. So they brought the award to where I was staying. The guys drank to my health, while the commander made sure I didn't drink alcohol with everyone else. Everyone rejoiced with me. My comrades knew I would be with them when we set out on our next operation. New officers, Lieutenants Ninstedt and Eichhorn, arrived a few days later to relieve me. My health had improved significantly by then. Given that the situation on this section of the front was calm, I was granted a 4-week sick leave. However, as the saying goes, You count your chickens in the fall. I had barely been home 5 days when I was summoned back to my unit by telegram. A frontline soldier must always be prepared for such surprises. In wartime, usually only soldiers in occupied territories could enjoy uninterrupted leave, even if they had already rested enough during combat operations there. One gets the impression that these privileged soldiers complain the most about the unfortunate army and the horrible war. Among them are those who are unfair to the valiant German soldiers and passively support the hatred deliberately generated by other countries. In Riga, on my way back to the front, I met Lieutenant Schur from the 3rd Company. He had received the same telegram as I had. He cursed like there was no tomorrow, and probably didn't even notice how glad I was to have a traveling companion. This made the unexpected departure from home not quite so hard. When we both arrived at our destination and asked about our units, we learned that they had already been redeployed somewhere else. Then we tracked down Hauptmann Schmidt, the commander of the self-propelled gun battalion, whom we both knew well. He promised to provide us with a car and a driver to take us to our units. But first, he wanted to throw a party for us, so we could drown our sorrows over our cut-short leave. The party was so wild that we didn't even remember how we left. We didn't come to our senses until we stopped in front of the battalion command post. Instead of an enemy attack, as we had assumed, another party awaited us there. Schur had been promoted to 1st lieutenant, so we had plenty of reasons to temper our anger. Our comrades had recalled us from leave, even though there was no operation on the horizon that might require our presence. The next day, I went to the company. It was stationed in a village located a fair distance away. At first, the sergeant major didn't recognize me at all. He was already about to greet me according to regulations, mistaking me for a new officer transferred to the company. The mistake was soon corrected. Delighted to see each other, we exchanged hearty handshakes. It should be noted that I had brought back from leave a new field cap, in full compliance with regulations. It noticeably changed my usual appearance. Before that, I had always worn a cap that in no way met the requirements of the regulations. My mother had sent it to me when I was promoted to 2nd lieutenant. By that time, the cap had completely faded, becoming more gray than black. Neither the cockade nor the eagle above it remained, but it still fit me well. This cap had always been a sore point for my battalion and company commanders. However, despite numerous demands, I simply could not part with it. It had always served me well and was so comfortable that the headphones didn't bother me. Even in bad weather, with strong winds, I wasn't afraid of losing it. It was a new field cap, but I wore it only in the rear areas. As soon as I put on my old combat cap, my subordinates understood what was going on. The first sentry to see me immediately alerted all the crews. He knew for sure that something special was about to happen. I had the opportunity on my first night to put my official cap back in my suitcase. This happened because the Russians had broken through at Ostrov, south of Pskov. I could have been grateful to them for waiting for my return. We set out in the early morning hours. We reached the Rosytyn-Pskov highway and approached our area of operations. The Russians had broken through from the east to the highway and were controlling it. We had to drive them back immediately with our counterattack. We arrived at the infantry command post exactly 15 minutes before the attack began. As always during our movement, I sat outside the turret with the gunner. I was on the left, next to the gun. Positioned this way, we could see better in the dark and assist the driver. I must have dozed off and suddenly lost my balance, flying over the driver's hatch and falling onto the road. And once again, luck was on my side. My driver, Beresh, reacted with lightning speed and slammed on the brakes before the track ran me over. Had it not been for his excellent reflexes, I would have met a far from heroic death. Unfortunately, the messenger was less fortunate than I was. He was crossing the road in front of the tank, lost his balance due to a pothole, got caught under the tracks, and was killed. Our new commander, Major Schwanner, was participating in his first operation with the entire battalion. He was proud to have gathered all his companies together and went to the regiment's command post to discuss the operation. Schwanner was just as easy to talk to as the unforgettable Yede. I explained that it was impossible to launch the attack at 8 a.m., and I insisted on postponing the attack until at least 9 a.m. Schwanner held a different opinion. He soon returned from the command post, and despite my concerns, we had to move out immediately. Thus, the operation was doomed to failure from the very beginning. Coordination between commanders took a back seat. However, it was crucial that the tank crews be given the opportunity to establish contact with the commanders of the infantry units. They had to approve the measures necessary for coordination with us. There was no time left for this, and the consequences were not long in coming. After a short distance, the infantry dismounted, and they were no longer visible. The inexperienced soldiers marched in tight clusters, like bunches of grapes, behind and alongside the tanks. This provoked heavy Russian artillery fire, and the infantry suffered heavy losses. Those who were not wounded threw themselves to the ground on the left and right. Naturally, under heavy fire, none of them dared to get up. It was a complete failure. None of us knew any of the officers, and no one knew who was under whose command. There was no benefit whatsoever in the fact that we had reached our objective with our tanks. As darkness fell, we had to abandon our position because we had no way to clear the trenches of Russians and occupy them ourselves. The Russians understood this perfectly well and had no intention of leaving. They remained in their dugouts in front of us, feeling completely safe. The hill from which our men were driven off was called, quite simply, Jewish Nose. Readers who suspect something sinister should not jump to conclusions about this name. It has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, but simply describes the shape of the hill using an expression that everyone understands. Jewish Nose was fortified in such a way that it remains a mystery to me how they could have lost it. The Russians captured it during a night raid. The fact that it fell into their hands can only be explained by the carelessness of our soldiers, who felt safe and were not on their guard. The ridge of hills rose steeply upward. The shortest route to them lay through a narrow gorge, perhaps 50 meters long. Only one tiger could pass through it. To the left and right of the gorge were systems of trenches, arranged in terraces along the slope all the way to the crest. The trenches, which connected the bunkers to one another, were dug into the hillside and were presumably completely protected from direct fire. The Russians had a reverse front in this defensive system. We had a detailed map of the fortifications at our disposal, so we knew the location of every bunker and every trench. I was to lead a frontal assault with my company. At the same time, the rest of the battalion, nearly at full strength after rest and replenishment, was to advance to our right along the ridge of hills leading to the Jewish Nose. This would have meant concentrating the entire battalion there, tank after tank, which would have made us easy prey for Russian artillery and provided yet another opportunity to wipe out the battalion along with its commander. He was already displeased with me because of my objections regarding the timing of the attack. I said that I considered it absurd to attack such a small target with the entire battalion. A company would have been quite sufficient for such an operation. If I were allowed to decide, I would have taken 4 tanks with me, and 4 more would have advanced along the line of hills so that, in the worst-case scenario, no more than 8 tanks could be lost. If those 8 tanks couldn't accomplish the mission, neither could the entire battalion, because the vehicles would block each other's firing sectors. My arguments, however, were not accepted. According to the conclusions drawn using models in a sandbox, the entire battalion was to be deployed. Unfortunately, there was nothing I could do to change that. However, it was always more reassuring to have a few vehicles in reserve that could pull the others out. I quickly broke ahead and reached the gorge before anyone else. We weren't in the best of spirits as we made our way there. The Russians could have dropped high explosive shells on us from the trenches and the upper edge of the gorge with very little effort. Each of us had to keep an eye on the others to avoid a major pileup. However, we reached the ridge without any problems. 2 tanks turned left at the foot of the Jewish nose. They followed the road that ran diagonally up the slope toward the ridge and reached the edge of the small patch of forest at the other end of which we were positioned. But as soon as I stuck my nose out from behind the ridge, a decent-sized shell flew past me. This made it wise to stay on the other side of the ridge. Later, I discovered that the Russians had set up self-propelled guns and artillery in front of the far side of the slope. They completely dominated the ridge. Any advance would have been suicidal. Besides, we had reached our former positions. We just had to occupy them. However, our infantry was miles behind us and seemed to be asleep. In any case, for the rest of the day, I didn't see a single infantryman. Meanwhile, the main force of the battalion approached us from the right. Although I was in radio contact with the battalion commander, he was hit by an anti-tank shell between the upper front sloped armor plate and the turret of my vehicle. The shell slowed us down. Had it hit just a little to the left, probably none of us would have even had time to utter a sound. Fortunately, he finally recognized us, and the incident ended with just that one hit. He simply couldn't figure out how I'd managed to reach the target so quickly. Lieutenant Neman, a new recruit in the battalion who was going into battle for the first time, was driving at high speed at the front of the combat group on the right. He was leaning out of the turret up to his belt buckle. Such bravado has nothing to do with bravery. It's suicidal madness. The lives of the entire crew were also being recklessly put at risk. I immediately switched to his company's frequency and began repeatedly telling him to slow down and be more careful. When that didn't help, I told him the exact distance remaining until the Russians would spot him and shoot him down. After all, I could see everything, and I knew how far ahead we could safely drive. But Neman either didn't hear me or didn't want to hear me. He drove to the spot I had indicated and immediately took a devastating direct hit. His tank disappeared from view for a while. His crew became the only one in our battalion listed as missing in action. None of those inside the tank returned. None of us approached the Tiger because it was in the epicenter of extremely intense enemy fire. How could a commander so recklessly sacrifice his crew? No matter how much I thought about it, I could not understand the actions of this young comrade in arms. Recently, the 3rd Company received a new commander, Hauptmann Leonard. We were lucky because Leonard was the kind of person everyone would want as their company commander. I am extremely grateful to him. He always helped me, the little lieutenant, when I wanted to convince the commander of something that was necessary for the company. And so there we were on the crest of the hill, waiting for our infantry. In reality, only the optimists were waiting, because the infantry usually didn't follow behind. If we wanted them to come with us, we took them along during the advance. In any case, there were so many wounded among the infantry that they didn't have the strength to hold the position through the night. The Russians were firing with ever-increasing intensity and accuracy. Their observers were likely sitting in trenches behind us on the left. They had no intention of surrendering. What were we to do with them? So we lost one tank after another, especially in the group on the right, which was in an even more unfavorable position than we were. Von Vesely, who had been our neighbor on the right the whole time, at the far edge of a small patch of forest, soon reported that an anti-tank gun had damaged the turret of his vehicle, and it was no longer combat-ready. Von Vesely advanced to engage the enemy and give us a brief respite. However, the Russians were accurate and didn't even let him fire a shot. He had barely poked his nose out from behind the ridge when he heard the report that the gun was firing. After 4 tanks from the group to our right, one of mine, and Vesely's tank were put out of action, the commander withdrew with his remaining Tigers to engage the infantry. I was to hold the ridge for as long as necessary. During the day, we could still manage it, though we could see that the Russians were constantly building up their forces and beginning to harass our rear. We wouldn't stand a chance at night. As darkness fell, and without waiting for instructions, I decided to withdraw through the gorge. No sane person would have demanded that I stay there overnight with only 3 operational tanks, or attempt to make my way back through the gorge in complete darkness. We passed through this dangerous area without incident, and along the way picked up Lieutenant Eichhorn's crew. His tank wouldn't start, and no one paid any attention to it. This meant that another Tiger remained in the open, which was truly a sad end to our efforts. Upon arriving at our starting position, I discovered that none of the infantrymen had any desire to move forward that night. So I was quite satisfied with my decision not to stay there any longer. Major Schwanner raised no objections, and probably realized that I had been right when I expressed my dissatisfaction and grumbled that morning. Everyone has to pay a high price for gaining experience. In the early morning hours of the next day, we moved our infantry halfway to the Jewish Nose. The soldiers formed a firing line there and were able to take up their old positions without any trouble. The terrain was fairly flat, but covered with woods in places, which provided a good opportunity to remain unnoticed. To the left of the road leading to the Jewish Nose, about 800 meters away, was a ridge of hills running parallel to us. That's where the Russians were attacking. Through my binoculars, I could see that hand-to-hand combat was underway, and without hesitation, I opened flanking fire on the enemy. This helped our guys a little. The Russian columns rolled down into the ravine opposite and to the left of us. They were about a kilometer away from us, and they were clearly visible from above. The Russians were moving so recklessly that we had to fire several rounds to force them to be more cautious. Their audacity was often simply astonishing. In broad daylight, they drove their tractors, artillery pieces, and ammunition trailers out into the open areas of the forward slope, as if we didn't exist at all. We let them drive far enough down so they couldn't quickly disappear behind the ridge, and then we fired on them. The distance was too great for a direct hit, and the drivers managed to escape before we set their vehicles and tractors ablaze. The Russians realized we had relocated and refrained from attacking that day. It was clear they were planning to fortify their positions on the Jewish point. They could, of course, have anticipated that we would attack a second time. Ultimately, Capturing these fortifications was absolutely essential for us. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to hold the defensive line to our left and right. The hill we had lost completely dominated the terrain, and we had to recapture it at all costs. That's all for today. If you liked the video, please support it with a like and subscribe to the channel. Bye for now, everyone. See you next time.